Yeah, Marcus, g'day.
John is Joan's son, and he's just curious to see what this dream.
This is, well, that's the camera there. We're capturing most of the podium and the people backs of heads. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a way of getting it better. Yes. Microphones are very good. Well, that's the image that we've got here. Just making it a bit bigger.
Thank you for doing so much.
That's the image that we're capturing at the moment. There's a few people wandering around, but so yeah, we're currently streaming. I'm assuming, yeah, we're currently live at the moment. But I can chop out the start of it. It's just I want to start just in case people are wandering in. That's right. Yes.
So, could I introduce you, John, to Darren Black, who's the current CEO of YMCA? So this is Darren. So Joan is associated with host.
It's not quite as long as some of the other associations, but significant.
I'd like to ask everybody to please take a seat.
You didn't even mention
She was responsible for ushering me.
And please do fill up the rows.
I think she's got very good judgment. Good insight, good judgment. And I sense, I've got to say,
enjoying the job?
I am. Great insight. I'm trying to yeah.
Hi, I was going to come in later.
Saying a few words.
With the brightness, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, okay. Congratulations on your appointment. Long time. Yeah, I came back here. I arrived at the day to Joan next year, tried to get here early. And I was here. And I went back. And at that point, not knowing that this would come together. So in the back of my mind, I was scared I arranged something. So I got back today and I was in Australia for 2 weeks, not in Canada.
Good afternoon, friends. We gather today on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We gather to celebrate the life of one of our elders, Joan Kellett. We are very pleased that all of Joan's children, John, Margaret, Anne and Sally and their families are with us today. A small group of people organised today's event. At our first meeting, people shared what Joan had meant to them. Joan was a great motivator, encouraging confidence partly through being a very good listener. Joan was a sounding board and a mentor and a font of wisdom. She is remembered as forthright, with sound values and integrity. She was also unbelievably courageous and progressive. Joan was a happy person, down to earth, who never put on airs and achieved a lot of good. It is almost 2 months since Joan died, and we feel Joan's absence from our lives. This afternoon's speakers from some of the organisations with which Joan was associated or who knew her from other shared endeavours will share their memories of Joan and her contributions to the Canberra community. Joan's influence is still around and motivating us. One of Joan's long-term friends, Graham Evans, who is here with us today, spoke recently to me of Joan's ability to get people to act together. She was a link person. She helped people to understand how their particular enthusiasm knitted with the enthusiasm of others. We are brought together today from many different organisations by our common and deep regard for Joan. There will be an opportunity for some of you to speak briefly, if you wish to do so, in the section set aside for reflection and remembrance. The first speaker is John Skeen, representing Swimming ACT.
Joan Kellett, OAM. I think those words alone tell us a lot about the kind of person that Joan was and the respect she had within the community. I feel very privileged to be standing this afternoon to speak on behalf of the swimming community and to share some thoughts on the contribution which Joan made to the sport of swimming in the ACT, and to reflect on some of the qualities which endeared her to all who had the pleasure of being a part of her life. Much has been written about her over the past couple of weeks, which outlined the huge contribution that Joan has made to the community over the past 50 years. I refer, of course, to the articles in the Swimming ACT website, to Michael Moore's article in the weekly Canberra Weekly News, and to the obituary which Chris Gould wrote in the Canberra Times. I do not propose to dwell on what has already been written, but there is one part of Joan's contribution to swimming in the ACT which I just would like to talk about. It's a part of what she did which probably has not received a lot of publicity, but it is the work that she did in regard to swimmers with a disability. Some 20, 30 years ago, Joan commenced a program when she was president of Swimming ACT, which introduced people with a disability to the life of swimming. Many young and not so young people with a disability have benefited from the program over the years. It was a program which was very dear to Joan's heart and led to a long association with the swimming side of an organisation called Special Olympics. For those of you who are not aware of the Special Olympics program, that is an organisation that caters for the sporting needs of people with an intellectual disability. Joan was always available to assist with refereeing anytime she was asked to help out at a meet being organised by Special Olympics. This culminated in her involvement in the organisation of a Special Olympics swim meet, which was held as part of the Canberra Centenary celebrations in 2013. Joan took on the role as meet director for this event, which involved the participation of some 800 athletes from all over Australia and included some teams from overseas. Joan's experience and organisational skills in managing the rather complex task of meeting the needs of these special people to ensure that they embraced the experience was something to behold. The compassion and respect that she showed to these athletes over the entire weekend, in sometimes trying circumstances, was evidence of the strength and character that she always brought to the table in anything which she did throughout her life. Rather than dwell on some of Joan's other contributions to the sport of swimming, I would like to reflect a little bit on Joan as a person. I propose to just take some out of context, some comments made by some former colleagues of Joan in the swimming community when Joan handed in the reins as president of Swimming ACT after 19 years at the Helen. A couple of these people are maybe here this afternoon, and I apologise if I'm taking some of this out of context, but I believe that the comments which were made at that time are very relevant today. The first person I would like to comment about is Peter Freeney. Peter may be well known to you not only in people in the swimming community but also in the parents and friends community, because Peter was a, if my memory serves me correct, was headmaster of one of the primary schools at Watson in his time when he was here in the ACT. Peter Freeney, OAM, was also president of the former ACT Swimming Council, of which Joan was secretary, and is also a former Paralympic swimming coach. He commented at the time that if Joan had a motto, it probably was, "Be fair to all." As far as I am concerned, the most notable thing about her leadership of Swimming ACT has been her willingness to listen and discuss problems, and her insistence on fairness to all when making recommendations and decisions. Ian Lamb, who is with us here today and was himself a former president of Swimming ACT, commented, "Joan has been of great service to Swimming ACT and the swimming community in general, and has certainly been a hands-on president, not just a figurehead. Her particular strength has been her representations to government and swimming pool lessee operators on many relevant issues." Judy McLeod, who succeeded Joan as president of Swimming ACT, commented that Joan had the ability to remain calm, listen to all sides, and give all clubs equal opportunity. Joan practiced her belief in the collective wisdom of many minds, and consequently was great at discussing things with other people in an attempt to achieve the best results. To her credit, Joan was a great networker, using every available opportunity to seek relevant expertise. She was a great listener and a great talker. Has anyone ever had a short conversation with Joan on the telephone? From my own personal point of view, I have nothing but respect and admiration for what Joan has achieved in her lifetime and the contribution she has made to the Canberra community over many years of service. These are, of course, reflected in the awards exhibited on the table at the rear of the room. Over the years, I have served on a number of committees with Joan and was always in awe of her knowledge and feel for what needed to be done to achieve the best outcome. Living in close proximity to Joan, we almost always travelled together to our various meetings, and I am sure that we solved many of the world's problems during those trips together in the car. Over the last 12 months, I would be taken to task if I did not report in at her home in Jumerick Street at least once a month to keep her up to date with the world of swimming in the ACT and to receive her advice on what should and should not be done. The swimming community will surely miss a truly great ambassador for our sport. I personally will miss a good friend and a colleague, and someone whom I have had the pleasure to work with over many years to promote the sport of swimming in the ACT. I would now like to introduce Viv Pearce from the ACT Council of Parents and Citizens Association to say a few words.
I speak to you today on behalf of PNC Council. Joan was a friend, a colleague and a mentor to me for over 12 years. At PNC Council she will be missed. Her wise counsel at meetings drawn from years of advocacy in the ACT public education system will be difficult to replace. How can the contributions of a person who joined PNC Council in 1971, already an active member at her local PNC at North Ainslie Primary, be summed up in a few minutes? The answer is obviously I can't. So I will give you a broad brush picture of some of her achievements during her 30 years as an active member of P&C Council, as executive, together with my personal recollections of my time with Joan. Joan was heavily involved as a parent representative in the establishment of the ACT as a separate, innovative education system as a member of the ACT Schools Authority. As decisions were made about the formation of our school boards and colleges, Joan was at the table. She provided a clear and strong voice for parents on dozens of government committees. Her vision of the importance of a strong, well-resourced public education system to our society drove her countless contributions to submissions and policies of the P&C Council. Joan was also an active member in the federal parent body, the Australian Council of State School Organisations. Needless to say, in 2003 we awarded Joan a lifetime membership to P&C Council. She strongly believed that parents should be a valued participant and partner in the education of their child. My appreciation of Joan as a mentor came through our work together on P&C Council's Schools and Communities in Partnership Committee. Together with other parents, we authored and delivered workshops, information sheets to assist parents running their P&Cs and acting as representatives for other parents. It will be no surprise that Joan's talk was about the role of sharing information to empower parents. I came to understand that Joan was a very kind and caring person when we worked together with parents of kids with special needs. Having a high needs child is an exhausting affair. Finding the energy to fight for a fair slice of the educational pie is simply daunting. Joan was there to listen and offer advice and encouragement to those resolute parents. She supported and was a foundation member of Council's Disability Working Group. As Graham Evans, another lifetime member, Council recently commented, and I think it's already been said, Joan was a link person. She had the capacity to show people how their particular enthusiasms knitted with the enthusiasms of others. P&C Council and its members will miss Joan's presence. I will miss it. If it were not for her wise counsel and encouragement, I would never have had the confidence to join Council as executive, let alone step up to the position of president. The importance of her support to parents over the years is incalculable. Joan's help has enabled many parents to play an active role in public education, and what is more important than the education of our children? We will remember Joan. Right, just being a link person now. In 2009, many of us were delighted and intrigued to see the ABC TV Stateline program, The Dames of Jumoresque Street. Two more of the dames are with us today, Betty Hill and Maureen Rogers. Now we're going to see an excerpt from that, in which Joan stars.
We always knew that as part of his contract with the New South Wales Department of Education, Harry would have to do country service, and so he got Canberra. And I wasn't unhappy about that. No, I wasn't. I actually I'm a bit politically minded, and I thought, oh, this is good, you know, this is where the politics happen. I was quite happy. My parents thought it was a bit different. My father thought Canberra was so cold, and I remember him saying to some people in Brisbane once, I was with him, and he said, have you ever been to Canberra? The woman said no. He said, well, don't go, it's a lovely place. He said, it snows in October. It did actually. He was, yes, he didn't think it was the right, he didn't think much of Canberra. There was nothing here. There was absolutely, like Ainsley was the nearest shops, there was no Dixon, and there was nothing. So everything was kind of delivered to your door. We had our greengrocer came, and this is how you met people. This is how you networked in your street, because everybody came out to buy their fruit and veggies, and you got your fruit and veggies off the truck, your dry cleaner came, your butcher came, your milkman came, your baker came. So it was all delivered. And then, of course, Dixon shops were built, and yeah, and so that all faded away. So it has faded away, you know. We're quite urban now, or suburban. Well, we're urban because, you know, they call us the inner north, and here we were on the outskirts of Canberra. Well, I think we all knew that we'd arrived without family, so it was either going to make or break you, wasn't it? And so we warmed to the people, and the people, I gather, warmed to us. And and Maureen, who lives across the road, she and Spencer, she'd moved around a fair bit, and I think she knew the value of getting to know your community. No, I can't remember when it was first opened, and I don't even think it was there when we arrived. Isn't that terrible? But it was there very soon after we arrived. And Harry had been, well, we both enjoyed the water enormously, and that was one of the things about coming to Canberra, that you no longer went to the beach, or, you know, your trips to the beach weren't as frequent. And he'd been a lifesaver and bronzed hero of the surf, that I used to say, with red hair. It was very important to us to teach the kids to swim, that the kids learned how to swim, that was a really integral part of having, of their knowledge to know how to swim. And to this day, I'm still on the Safe Waters Committee, and that is about kids learning to swim and the importance of kids learning to swim. We arrived in 1960, just on the verge of Canberra really expanding, so that with a young family, one income and one car, it was a thing that you did on a Sunday. You went for a drive to have a look at the new suburbs that were being built, because there were new suburbs going up all over. And yes, so you saw Canberra grow, and then as your family grew and you thought about the development of Canberra, you realised that it had, you know, Burley Griffin, the founding fathers, that there's some beautiful things, some terrific things have happened in Canberra. So that was momentous when you went overseas.
Well, that was a big, but of course you didn't expect you were going to be away as long as you were either. Nobody's had a cross word. Nobody's fallen out over even anything, big or small. We're always just there for each other. I mean, it sounds like a fairy story, but it's true. It's true. It's not a fairy story. It's just we're always interested in what people are doing and their children and their grandchildren, and you know, you're always just up with it. And I just regard myself as very fortunate that Jumeirah Street was where this house happened to be. and these other people happen to move in beside us.
It's very important to have roots where you belong. I feel sorry for people that move all the time because they are losing something, they're gaining something, but they're losing so much for me.
I think Dixon's a wonderful place to live. So very convenient to everything and wonderful friends. Our friends are so long standing, you know, over all those years that it's just a natural thing, you know. Of course, at my age, you're losing lots of your friends and neighbours, so that's just life, isn't it? And I've had a very fruitful life.
But it was the people, really it was the people that I think kept us here, and it was the kids who wanted to stay. Well, at least in our case, our kids wanted to stay here. This was like, they've all been overseas, but this is where they feel content, I guess. Yeah, this sort of provides a place for them. I remember wanting to get rid of the dining room table, which I have eventually done. And I was told how terrible that was, to get rid of the dining room table, because that's where we all sat for years and years and years. So yes, they must be sentimental. They must feel that this is where their roots are, I guess. Mm.
It's home, isn't it?
It's home.
I'm sure you agree how lovely it is to hear Joan's voice again and to see that smile. And thank you to John and Viv for their words leading into that. I'd like to now introduce Kay Teague. One of Joan's late consuming interests was volunteering with Alzheimer's ACT. The volunteer coordinator, Kay Teague, will now share her memories of Joan.
I have put together an acknowledgement of Joan's work with Alzheimer's Australia. Joan became involved with Alzheimer's ACT in 2009. Joan first became involved with Alzheimer's ACT when her husband Harry was diagnosed with dementia. And at the time, being a volunteer for the organisation was something Joan had thought she would like to do. In 2010, she became a committed volunteer. Joan had some difficulty with her own mobility and later diagnosed with cancer. However, this did not stop her, and she was always up for a challenge, supporting people with dementia and their families. Joan volunteered every Friday at Alacara, which is a social group for people with dementia who require more support as their illnesses progress. Joan always responded with kindness and consideration. She identified their individual needs and acknowledged the people for who they were. She encouraged them to participate in the group with a great smile and a sense of humour. As always, made the staff and clients feel warm and welcome. However, the tasks, be it giving out morning tea, setting up the room, cleaning up afterwards, Joan was happy to help. Nothing was too menial for her. She was a trusted volunteer to work alone. She visited people with dementia in their homes to give their families a break, and at the same time she recognised that the families responded well and connected with her. She would arrange to have coffee, outings with the person with dementia, and their carer. She was always very thoughtful. Alzheimer's Australia ACT would like to recognise Joan's contribution to the organisation and appreciate her wonderful work. She is sadly missed. Joan has had a long association with the YMCA of Canberra as a member of the board. I'd like to introduce Jenny McComb. Jenny McComb was the CEO during that time. I'd like to introduce her.
I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Ngunnawal people on whose land we are remembering and celebrating the life of Joan Kellett, and acknowledge their ongoing contribution to this land and community. For those who don't know me, my name is Jenny McComb and I was the CEO of the Canberra Y for the past 14 years, and pretty much the same time that Joan was on the board. And I thank Darren Black, the current CEO, for allowing me the privilege of acknowledging Joan's contribution to the YMCA. In the words of staff, volunteers and directors, Joan is described as amazing, inspiring lady, caring, cheeky, tenacious, kindred spirit, value-based, highly intelligent, stubborn, private, independent, passionate, influential, great advocate, cool, respectful, a woman of great integrity, fair but tough, classy, committed, mentor, responsible, witty, thoughtful, brilliant mind, big heart, family, inclusive, committed to children, beautiful lady, sharp as a tack, colourful, dedicated, powerful influence, great jewellery, hoppy leg, never forgot the staff, sometimes cross, guiding, thoughtful, battler for a fairer society, made a difference at grassroots, active, willing, spirited. Joan knew everyone, incredible lady, wise, and the list goes on. One of Joan's first connections with the Y was as a participant. It was not long after Joan started at the Y that she started to make her presence felt, and she began to understand that all things weren't quite right at the Y. So when anything is not quite right, Joan has to do something about it. So Joan was elected to the board in 2001, where 15 years she became a powerful influence in determining the strategic direction of the Canberra Y. Joan brought to the board her deep understanding of governance and years of experience, and most of all, her understanding of what community meant. This contribution should never be underestimated, for at the time of her appointment, the Y was in dire financial circumstances to the extent that it was selling its assets, which made Joan very angry. Don't make Joan very angry. It was doing this to fund its operations, and it has lost its connection to community. Fast track to the end of Joan's term on the board, and that passionate commitment, especially to quality education and care for children, is evident, with children's services being the fastest growing area of the Y, including 2 new early learning buildings. I smile when I think of Joan's governance role and how she quietly and thoughtfully went about keeping the board focused on the mission, the vision and the values of the Y. Board directors will remember Joan getting out her little book and very respectfully saying, "Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions." And Mr. Chairman knew at that point that the board had not fully considered all things. The book would open and Joan would ask the questions. She was not afraid to ask the hard questions that more times than not resulted in more questions than answers. They were good, probing questions, and it was evident Joan had researched and thought deeply about the matters before the board's consideration. Joan often politely was heard to say, "Now, Mr. Chairman, that is a complete porky pie. You know it, I know it, now what are we going to do about it?" For it had all been recorded in Joan's little book. Joan was very clear what her role as a director was, and the line was drawn between governance and management. Having said that, she was seen around the Y, arriving with plates of hot cross buns, Christmas treats, flowers, bottles of wine. She was known to just pop in and say hello, wish the staff and volunteers a happy Christmas, or Merry Christmas, Happy Easter or Merry Christmas. Joan represented the board at all official functions, to name just a few: the auxiliary thank yous, senior sports carnival, sailing club 50th anniversary, raid presentations, opening and closing of buildings. She even popped into the Women and Girls Fun Run. Joan was a popperina, always bearing some form of gifts, always an advocate for the staff and volunteers. Her words, "We are only as good as the wonderful staff and volunteers who deliver our programs and services." Joan was a great advocate for the smaller Ys and earned quite a reputation at YMCA national conventions as that opinionated woman from Canberra. That never bothered Joan, for she clearly understood the importance of delivering programs and services to small rural country towns and remote areas around Australia. She was also a great advocate of supporting young people by giving them every opportunity to succeed. The Hocking family is one of the many families that have benefited from Joan's involvement on the pool deck. Jenny Hocking, an employee of the Y, gave me this little story. "I had the pleasure of meeting Joan over 13 years ago when Bindi first attended the ACT Swimming Championships. Joan became synonymous with swimming comps in the ACT. Her patrolling of the swimming deck, decked out in the regulation whites, coupled with her often DQs, disqualifications on the pink slip, remained forever imprinted. Fast forward 12 years and 3 Olympic Games later, dual gold medalists at Commonwealth Games and 2 silvers at the Worlds. Joan's passionate support for little country swimmers and their passion to be the absolute best they can be remains to the forefront of many grateful families. Our thanks to Joan for all that she has done on the sidelines to assist little country girls like Bindi dream big. I'm so glad we were asked to wear something colourful today, for Joan was colourful, a colourful character and a colourful in dress. Joan loved to frock up, as she would say. Oh, she always looked beautiful. I recall the last time I took her to the hospital for her chemo. Picking her up, there was Joan dressed beautifully in a bright orange top, matching turban, makeup, lipstick, and of course earrings. She loved earrings, something we both enjoyed. At the hospital, what struck me was Joan's concern for everybody else. And by the way, she knew everybody at the hospital. Even though Joan herself, her chemo session hadn't gone well, she was more concerned about the young nurse who might be late getting home, as Joan was the last patient. And by then the lights were out and there were only 2 nurses left. A funny story from that day that demonstrated what a private person Joan was. Joan never gave her age away, even on her board nomination form where you were asked to write your age. Joan wrote, "None of your business." And at the hospital, you know when they are about to do a procedure and they ask you what's your name and date of birth. Well, Joan says the name very loud and clear, Joan Kellett, and then date of birth. Joan leans right over to the doctor and whispers her date of birth, so I couldn't hear. So it was never any of my business how Joan was, old she was. And so today, for the first time, I find out how old Joan was. I'm not sure Joan would approve of this. Joan possessed many great qualities, but I believe, and so do many others, that one of Joan's greatest qualities was her genuine interest and respect for all people. I'm sure many of you have sat in her lounge room and had a conversation with her, or one on the phone, or one on Joan's pop-ins. Joan knew what you were interested in, what you were doing, where you'd been, where you were going, all about your children and family, what was your latest golf score, and so this very personal and interesting conversation would start. She was so genuinely interested in you as a person. You would leave a conversation with Joan feeling really special. My very last conversation I had with Joan left me feeling just that. What an amazing gift. We have heard of all the wonderful things Joan has been involved in from other speakers and organisations. If you want to continue to honour the spirit of Joan Kellett, to do something for your community, volunteer your talents, your gifts and passions to make a difference in your community. So next time you're asked to volunteer, say yes and make Joan proud. Support your community events. Yes, bake that cake for the fete, accept the role on the community board, volunteer to drive someone to an appointment, bring in your neighbour's garbage bin and feed the cat. Support your local Canberra teams. You can start by getting out to watch the Raiders tomorrow. I don't think Joan was a great lover of league, but she was a great believer in community and supporting your local teams. She and I shared many conversations about the Brumbies. She especially loved it when John would take her to the game. This often was followed up with deep and meaningful discussions about all things Brumbies, from their governance to the tackle of Stephen Moore. And she thought she was really smart when John had been, because she knew a lot more than I did, so the conversation was good. It is impossible to put into words the importance of friendship and how much Joan meant to me. She positively influenced and mentored me through my time as the CEO. Joan was very passionate about empowering women in leadership roles and always was there for me when I wavered in my own belief and ability. She would say, lead by your values, be considered and wise, and above all, do what is right for the organisation you lead and in the best interest of the community. Her words still ring in my ears. How will that impact on the staff and volunteers? Will that decision make a more inclusive and better community? I will miss, but never forget, this inspiring, beautiful lady. The Y will miss you, and the Canberra community is a far better community because of Joan Kellett's passionate contribution. I will now hand over to Darren Blake, the CEO of the YMCA, who I understand has a special announcement to make.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much, Jenny. I knew Joan only briefly, but that was enough. To recognise a woman of grace, deep insight and wisdom, and someone very capable of making an argument about things she believed in. And clearly, as you've heard today, is representative by everyone that's come out to remember Joan. She was deeply committed to her community. And so because of that, we at the Y have agreed to establish a scholarship in Joan's name. It will be a perpetual scholarship recognising her passion and commitment to the community, and in particular to the development of children and young people. The Joan Kellett Memorial Scholarship will be a perpetual scholarship each year, awarded to a young YMCA staff member, club member or volunteer to aid in their personal, professional and leadership development, with the aim of enabling them to achieve their potential as future leaders in our community. We'll establish the scholarship with an initial value of $5,000 per year, which will assist a young person with the costs associated with travel and participation in an agreed program for their development. And we will evaluate that in terms of the cost contribution on a periodical basis to ensure that that amount remains significantly relevant. That's the special announcement. And let me introduce Michael Moore, AM, to say a few words about Joan.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to join with others in acknowledging the Ngunnawal people as the traditional owners of the land, but I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of Joan and Harry Kellett, of Sally, Anne, Margaret, John, and Joan and Harry's grandchildren who are here, because I think this is a really special day about a special person who, the very last phone call we had just before I went overseas and not too long before Joan died, my friend, how are you? And I tried to turn the conversation around, well, Joan, actually, how are you? But of course that was quite a battle. We did actually finally get to how are you, but I had to first of all tell her how I was going. And it's an insight to a very special person, and of course that fits in what others have to say. But I also have just a couple of other little memories that I'd like to share before I go on to an overview, if you like, of how I saw Joan in our community. My brownies. You remember how many times Joan would say, my brownies? We were going to do something, no, tonight or tomorrow, that's my brownies. And there was a particular insight into Joan and the fact that she cared so much for this small group of people, and it always took priority. And just the same as you knew very much about Helen and my children, and always knew the detail, where they were at school, how they were going when one was overseas. As they grew older, Joan was aware of the detail and always had really interesting questions to ask. And so we've heard about her role in terms of education, in terms of swimming, in terms of Alzheimer's. And I think it's really interesting that a couple of the things that came through, and particularly when John Skane was talking about the world's problems. And of course I knew Joan in a political context. So this was a great opportunity to solve the world's problems, and I'll come back to that. But we began solving the world's problems when I first met Joan as part of the development of the Residents' Rally in 1988, getting ready for the first ACT election, and our political life stayed very close together for right through the time that I was in politics, and for many, many years after, until she died, I don't think we ever had a single conversation that there wasn't some of the world's problems that we're needing to solve. And when I ran with Joan as my partner for the 1998 election, and I have our platform with me, I'm going to quote parts of it because it is something that we did together, and it's something that reveals Joan's sense of community and the community that she wanted. So we wanted a healthy society, about being able to enjoy life, about feeling safe, about access to quality education, adequate food, reasonable shelter, a stable ecosystem, and a socially just community. It's a healthy society that facilitates personal freedom, independence and dignity. But that wasn't enough for Joan. We needed to have much more detail about what a healthy society was about, the vision. We foresaw a city that's safe, healthy, nurturing, attractive, prosperous and fun, that treads lightly on the environment, where business and environment are friends, where development serves people and the quality of life, where real neighbourhoods, real communities, women and children and men are safe. A city in which the treatment of illness occurs in the context of caring, health promotion and disease prevention. It's really interesting that governments are only just starting to get this now. Social fabric that's healing and strengthening, a city that plays, a city that sings and paints and creates at every level, from preschoolers of the world of renown. And you know, how much of Joan can you hear in this? Because there was a huge amount of this thinking, I can assure you, that did come from Joan. A city that, a community that's enterprising, clever, innovative, prosperous. A city that serves and enriches the region. A city that's a respectful neighbour and a good citizen. A city where politicians are expected to behave decently. We had some strange ideas. We understand that a society can only be as healthy as the people who run it, and we strive for openness, cooperation, respect and civility. That's the Joan that I know.
Thank you very much, Michael. Michael, as he referred to, would be known to you as a former independent member of the Legislative Assembly, and he referred to the time in 1998 when Joan and he stood on the More Independence ticket. I'd now like to introduce the Sirens, who will sing 2 songs for you. While you listen to these songs, we invite you to think about Joan. After the songs, there will be a period of quiet reflection and remembrance. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to be brought to you. Please tell us your name and then share your memory of Joan. Here are the Sirens.
Before we start, I might just say a couple of words to explain the link theme between why the Sirens are here. Joan wasn't a member of the Sirens, but I guess as a testament to how connected she was in the Canberra community, there are 5 of our Sirens, myself included, who knew and cared for Joan. I'm a director on the YMCA board. One of our other Sirens who can't be here today, sadly, was a former chair of the YMCA and knew Joan. That's Judith Cubbage. And we've got a couple of... No, she was on the YMCA board as well. Yeah, she was connected. And a couple of, I don't know if they'll accept the term associate dames of Doomerisc.
Junior dames.
Marilyn and Meg, who are here today, and one of our former Sirens who's no longer with us, Jill Parliament, also knew Joan. We hope that it's a privilege for us to get to sing today, and we hope to enjoy it.
More
My name is Verity Brown, former Policy Officer at PNC Council. I would like to read a statement from Julie Smith and Mark Dunstan, who are very sorry they're unable to attend today. Joan is one of those people who has undoubtedly made the world a better place, and did so in so many ways and so unassumedly. We met Joan through the Watson Woodlands and Save Our Cities campaigns in the early 1990s, and have viewed her as a dear friend and advisor ever since. Her quiet, supportive presence and wise consideration of issues was important to the success of various initiatives in the North Canberra community, and she was the founding chair of the North Canberra Community Council. Mark stood as a candidate in the ACT election when Joan was the campaign manager for the More Independents, and we especially experienced and appreciated her insight and intellect and passionate commitment to integrity and to the public interest. In subsequent years we became close friends, and Joan was a saviour of our sanity and caring friend during the years we were raising our children and as we experienced the passing of our own parents. We shared much sadness and joy over the past few years, and Joan was an interesting and caring person who was always ready to discuss the politics of the day. We didn't always agree, but with Joan, you could always share views respectfully and learn. We will miss her terribly, as many others will. Julie Smith and Mark Dunstan.
I'm Jenna Pincus, and I've known Joan since 1980 when I was working in sport and recreation. I'll come out the front so you don't have to turn around. I'll just try and make it brief. But Joan came in to see me, of course, about swimming grants, and she brought Harry, who was very capable in supporting her. Joan and I had a wonderful relationship, her as a community representative and me as a bureaucrat trying to understand how I could help the community. Joan taught me a lot about that. We remained good friends all the way through since then. One of the couple of things that we didn't mention today was Joan was actually chair of the ACT Sport and Recreation Committee, or whatever it was called then, and I'm sure she dealt with all those grant applications more fairly than anyone else would have done. Joan was actually a wonderful community plant for me when I wanted to work out how I could undermine some of my boss's anticipations of selling the Olympic pool, which Michael would have some empathy with that, of not selling it. Joan, Residents Rally, actually held a huge demonstration at the Olympic pool, which was absolutely wonderful for my heart, because I was trying to stop it being sold or developed. I wish the Residents Rally was out there doing that now, but never mind. Joan and I continued to collude how we could save community assets for the ACT, how we could fix the ACT government, how we always agreed, we always knew what should happen. So Joan was a sheer joy to me as a bureaucrat that was supposed to just toe the line and who really wanted to help the community, even when that didn't mean towing the line. So I want to say thank you to Joan. I didn't get the chance to say that to her. The other thing I'd like to mention is in more recent years, we got Joan to be a member of the committee for the Friends of the Albert Hall, another campaign that was worthy of Joan and the Canberra community, and we know that that's been saved too. What really impressed me was at our last AGM, when Joan knew she was very ill, she was always very confident and hopeful, and whether that was genuine or not, she made it so much easier for all of us. She stood again for the committee when I knew she was very ill. She was brave and courageous till the last moment, and that made it so much easier for us who dealt with her. And I'd like to say to her family, who I haven't met, that you know that you are very lucky. I'm presuming you're the family, are you? You know that you're very lucky in having such a wonderful, courageous mother. But I also say that Harry, when he was there, was a wonderful support to Joan. So thank you.
John Skeen, in his address quoted some remarks I made many years ago. I don't remember making them, but I thoroughly endorse what I've said at that time. Joan's contribution to ACT swimming was immense, but the part I think of when I think of Joan is her support for the Little Leagues. We have a squad series in swimming ACT, the lowest of which is the development squad. And the development squad goes to Sydney once a year to swim at the Olympic pool in New South Wales Swimming's development meet. They normally go up by bus. I don't know too many district presidents would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to farewell their development squad going off to Sydney. Joan certainly did. We both happened to be on the same New South Wales committee at one stage, the Education Committee. And Joan and I would drive to Sydney once a month to go to this evening meeting. As Michael has said, there were many, many problems of the world got solved in the 4-hour drive to Sydney with Joan. And some of them, in relation to swimming, came to fruition. Joan's influence on that committee in New South Wales was like her influence here, quite impressive, and I think you'll see that it has been recognised by New South Wales Swimming in an award for swimming excellence, a well-deserved award.
Hi, I'm Leslie Charlton. I was on the PNC committee 2001 till about 2000, something like that anyway. I haven't been connected with everyone. I've been out of the scene for quite some time because I work at the other side of the fence. I work in schools now. When I found out the news, of course, Facebook is wonderful because that's how I found out, and I was shocked. And I'd like to thank Susan and Joan for contacting me, because I do live under a rock these days, to make it this possible for me to attend. I do love Joan. I've never forgotten her, and I guess I never will. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Andrew Bailey, and I used to be the president of the Dixon Swimming Club. And I got to know Joan and Harry, even though they're children, who I think were past members of the Dixon Swimming Club, who are no longer involved. She used to come down on a Sunday to check out the club, to make sure that we were running it correctly, and she was very interested in the development of all the students, all the kids who were coming along on a Sunday. And I was really touched that even though their children had moved on, that she took the time to come down and just see how the club was going. And I went to some of the ACT board meetings, and Joan ran those meetings very forcefully and very fairly, as people have commented. And over the years, my children moved on and I moved on. But whenever I saw her in town, we'd stop and have a chat. And some of the comments that have been made today about how she took an interest in everybody, I think is very true. And I'm here with Neil Parsons from the club as well, and Martin Roberts, who is an ex-Olympian. He's overseas at the moment and couldn't be here, but he emailed us and wanted us to pass on his fond memories of Joan and the contribution that she made to Dixon Swimming Club, but also swimming in general. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Debbie Stanford. I'm just a friend of Joan. I think I just wanted to honour her quite unique ability to have intergenerational friendships. So, you know, I'm not all that young myself, but, you know, across a whole generation, I felt there was like zero gap, and I think that's a really special sort of ability. And part of that, how that sort of was expressed, was her ability to see children, you know, whatever age, as just another person. And a particular thing that stayed with me as an inspiration, I think, for the rest of my life is her quite often stated view that children were very capable, and we would very often sort of estimate what they were capable of. And I think it's the sorts of things that have been described today about the things she invested herself in was probably underpinned by that sense that we've got this very sort of recognised resource, and people just need to be there and sort of do whatever they can to sort of bring that out. And I hope that we'll all in some way be able to contribute in the same way as she has in so many different ways to see children as that resource and allow that to blossom in the way that she has.
Hi, I'm Helen McKerris. I met Joan initially as when she and Harry were chief referees of the Masters Games in Canberra in 1997. You know, I was a recorder on the desk with her, and but you know, she's we just found her amazing, and her involvement. I'm just staggered listening to and reading all the things that she was involved in. I don't know how she managed to go to bed at night or something. I can't believe that someone can do so much in their lives. I then met her again after I retired, and I'm a member of the PC user group, and there's a group of computer users who came along during the day, and I saw her there, and I don't know. It sounds as though her computer skills were probably much more advanced than that group, but it was wonderful to catch up with her again there.
My name's Jane Tullis. I knew Joan through the PNC Council and AXO, the national body. Two very distinct memories. I had the privilege of driving Joan home from Sydney once after an AXO conference, and to her family, she was so proud of every one of you, and her distinct joy was to see independent thinking, even if it was different to hers, and she felt so proud of her family for being strong people and having the courage of their convictions. But she was also part of many committees, as people have said, and I chortled when I heard the name of one of them, which was the Animal Ethics Committee. So I did query out loud how many unethical animals we had in the ACT, and Joan, who was always respectful to people in public, just quietly said, "You haven't met as many politicians as I have, Joan."
and I'm one of the new dames on the block at Jumoresque Street. Meg and I arrived 40 years after Joan and Harry, and we've been embraced in just a wonderful community. We've had people like Maureen and Betty and Brian and Margaret and David and Lorna have just made a community that feels so welcoming. And Joan was obviously an inspiration to that, and our street is just a wonderful place to live. And Joan, just inspiring. You know, you'd say, she'd say, "How are you?" And I'd say, "Oh, my leg's a little bit wonky at the moment." And she'd say, "Your soul's not, you're dancing and you're singing, get on with it." So, yeah, we will miss her sadly, and just a wonderful woman to be amongst us.
Thank you to everybody who's contributed your memories of Joan, and thank you to the Sirens too for that beautiful singing. If you did not quite get to your feet, please write in the red remembrance book, which is on the back table at the back of the room, where there are also copies of the obituary written by Chris Gould, one-time neighbour and long-time friend of Joan. There are copies of the recent edition of the City News in which Michael Moore's column was devoted to Joan, and the tribute to Joan in P&C Council's newsletter. Please feel free to take copies of these. Our final speaker today is Joan's son, John Kellett.
In swimming parley, I feel a bit like the anchor on a relay right this minute, but I've been touched by the words that have been spoken today. Thank you very much. A lot of what I do say today will be thank yous, but before I do that, just sort of time travel a little bit. As you've heard today, Joan and Harry had 4 children, but there is one other. He was a child of Joan and Harry's for 1 year. Another brother, if you like, a brother to Margie, Annie and Sally. His name was Tetsuharu Takakawa. He and I were the first direct exchange students. Dixon College, where I went, and the school where Tetsu went, did a direct exchange. And I'll just sort of pause on this a little bit, as if you like a kind of a family insight, through my own eyes here anyway. So back in 76, unlike Joan, who didn't like to give away her age, I was 16. And Joan had been brought up in a reasonably strict household, and some of you know, and others may appreciate, you know, Joan was reasonably strict herself, extracted her pound of flesh from kids, particularly if they, you know, didn't live up to what they should have. And the teacher who had spoken to Year 11 about the opportunity of studying in Japan, I kind of jumped at it and thought, this is great. Not to get away from home, but just in terms of the full spectrum. And I'm thinking, you know, not so much about what was my dad going to say. I was thinking, what is my mum going to say? She's definitely not going to, you know, let me go all the way to Japan. Anyway, I'm kind of terrified of this conversation I've got to have with her, because I was really hell-bent on going. And to my surprise, to this minute, rather than get an objection, you know, Joan was really quite open to the idea. And Tessa came and lived with the family, and for a few years after that, other exchange students that came from that school, Joan stayed connected with them. So I just thought I'd pass that little bit on. It hadn't been raised at all in any of the presentations or any of the obituary comments that have been published so far. Joan had two sons, John and Tetsu. Moving into my sort of theme of thanks, particularly I'd like to thank Susan Rockcliffe, who, through my eyes anyway, is the catalyst for today, and also to thank the various organisations that came together after Susan contacted them to make today happen. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the organisations. The next thank you is a family perspective thank you. Through my eyes as her son, I watched her evolve from a dedicated homemaker quite seamlessly to a very dedicated community advocate and servant. And all of her achievements have been outlined either today or published in recent times. But I personally would like to thank three people. I thank four people, well, I should thank four people. One of them is not here, her husband Harry. The other three are here, my three lovely sisters. Without their support in the back room, so to speak, I think there was a comment earlier on, you know, how on earth did one person achieve all of that in her lifetime? Without Harry's support, without Margie's support, without Sally's support and Annie's support, we probably wouldn't be here today. So thank you to my family. Just as a footnote to that, I was asked not to mention this, but I'm the big brother. In very recent times, as you know, Joan had issues with mobility, health issues. My sister Margaret, who, as you know, lives in Canberra, helped Joan tremendously in many, many ways to assist Joan to stay connected to some of the things that she wanted to stick with. So Margaret, particularly, thank you. Joan was always one, at least growing up and also as an adult, you know, it's very important to achieve your potential. And I think we'd all agree that Joan, in her lifetime, she did achieve to her potential. So she should be very proud of that, as we are, of course. And I think that she would have few regrets, which I think is also very, very good. Just my closing, not so much a remark, but we're still in the process of you know, sorting out things back at 32 Jumerick Street, and I was in her and Harry's bedroom the other day, and on the bed was a book on the history of community nursing. And I thought, you know, classic Joan, you know, in addition to the achieving potential thing that she drummed into us. One thing that always inspired me about Joan was her inquisitive mind, always wanting to read in search of knowledge. And I can imagine that many people who are unwell and get care from community nurses wouldn't necessarily go the next step to find out a little bit more about community nursing. So here on the bed still is this book, you know, this history of community nursing. And with a kind of a smile, I thought to myself, you know, had Joan been alive and capable, in the same way that she got involved in Alzheimer's after Harry's experience, Joan could have added the community nursing to one of her pet things and hand up to volunteer for a committee on one thing or another within the community nursing. So I guess, you know, that's the Joan we know, the Joan we'll remember, and just once again, thank you for everybody coming today. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for all of the organisations to making today happen, and thank you to the K team. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before we meet over a cup of tea to talk more of the Grand Lady, there are some acknowledgements to be made. Firstly, on behalf of the organising group, I would like to thank the YMCA of Canberra for hosting this afternoon's community gathering. Thanks to P&C Council, Alzheimer's ACT and Swimming ACT for all the practical support that they've offered. The wise support and helpfulness channelled through Bree Boucher, manager of Lemire Lodge, the staff, Shannon and Laura, has been very generous. Many organisations and individuals were keen to contribute to this event. Joan's family has provided information and support for this gathering. The sound workshop provided expert sound support through Tim Austin, and Marcus Hipkins from the North Canberra Community Council set up the live stream for those who are not able to join us today in person. If you would like to view that, or if you know somebody who couldn't be here but would like to see it, if they go onto the North Canberra Community Council Facebook page, this live stream will be living there. I wish to thank the small and dedicated band of people who have helped to make this gathering a wonderful celebration. Jane Gorry, Merity Brown, Robin Cummins, John Skeen, Leslie Avery, Jane Goffman, Viv Pearce, and Cecilia Skeen, who arranged the flowers. Everyone has contributed their diverse and valuable skills, and I am particularly grateful to Chris Gould for her keenness to do the best possible job for her friend Joan. Thank you for turning out today. In closing the formal part of this celebration, I invite you to show your appreciation for Joan's enormous contribution to Canberra and to us.
Thank you.